Yevamos Daf continues the Gemara's discussion of an Arel, someone who does not have a bris milah, and how his halacha applies to various forms of kedusha. Specifically, we're discussing truma. We'll also be talking about paraduma water and kachim. Gemara will briefly mention meiser. The first sugya which will be discussed is that of a mashuch, someone whose milah is reversed. That is, his arla was lengthened so that it recovers the makam milah. That is someone who needs a redone milah. The Gemara will discuss what his halacha is as far as truma. The Gemara will widen the conversation to include other types of milahs that need to be redone, and the Gemara will discuss whether they can eat truma, whether they need their milah to be done by yom, only during the day and not in the evening, and some other related halachas. And then the second major sugya will be that as to the hazah of paraduma water, whether that can be done by an aro, by someone who does not have a bris milah or not. So let's begin. The Gemara is first concluding. The Gemara begins with a brisa that refers to what it said earlier, that in the midbar there was no ruach tzifonis, there was no pleasant north wind that blew during the day. So the Gemara quotes a brisa that says all the years that Klal Yisrael were in the midbar, they had a ruach tzifonis every evening at midnight. Exactly at midnight they had the pleasant north wind. And that's based off where it said that Amakas Bechoros happened at midnight. This teaches me that was an East Ratzon. That was a specific time of Ratzon. That was a time which Kadosh Baruch Hu, as it were, did things for Klal Yisrael. That's so for generations afterwards, even well into the reign of David HaMelech, we received a pleasant Ruach Tzfonis at that time. Now, the Gemara quotes a statement of Rav Huna about the mashuch. Mashuch, as we said, is someone who has reversed his milah or has his milah reversed on him, possibly by a guy, and it stretched and pulled the remnants of the urla so that it covered the makam milah again, and now it has to be recut. So the Gemara says, Rav Huna says, the halacha is that someone who's a mashuch is allowed to eat truma midiraisa, but the rabbanan made gzeira that he should not eat truma. Midiraisa is considered to be a mahul. He still had a bris milah. Midrabanan, he's nire ka'orel, and therefore he's not allowed to eat truma midrabanan. So Gemara has a couple of kashas from brises on Rav Huna, and the Gemara will ultimately reject Rav Huna's halacha. So the Gemara's first kasha is that we have a brisa that says that mashach tzaruch sheyimo, a mashach requires milah. So the person who asked the question felt that meant that it's chayiv and milah midaraisa, not only midarbanan. So the Gemara answers no. Tzarach milah means midarbanan. The Gemara says, how can anybody think that it means daraisa? The phrase tzarach always implies a rabbinic requirement, because if it would be daraisa, it would say that he's considered to be an orel. It would have the din of an orel. By saying that he requires a milah, that means that he does not have the din of an orel, but the Rabbanon made a requirement for milah on him anyway. So the Gemara says, one who asked the kasha learned it from the rest of the brisa, because we only really quoted the first opinion. There's a second opinion, and there's a retort from the Tanakama to the second opinion, who was Rabbi Yehuda, and based off of that, the Shoel, the one who asked the kasha, learned that the Tanakama was saying that it's considered to be an Orel deraisa. What's the opinion? What's the second opinion? So the rest of the brisa reads as follows. Rabbi Yehuda says he should not do a milah. And Orel, a mahol that was moshoch, should not do a milah because there's a sakana. He may end up cutting the wrong thing and causing himself a permanent injury. So the Chacham said back to him, in the days of Bar Kuziva, in the days of Bar Kochva, were many people who were mashoch because the Romans had forced them to have their arla redrawn. And when Bar Kochva defeated the Romans and took control, so he had a lot of these people redo the milah, and many of them gave birth. They had children, they had sons, they had daughters, they had no issue, and they had two psukim that supported the need for a re-milah, and this is where the person who asked the kasha thought that this opinion held that it was a deraisa, because he brings two psukim. He brings himo yimo, the double expression himo yimo says even multiple milahs should be done if something happens to undo the first milah. And the second one is where it says as brisi hefer. So that's an extra expression. He rejected my bris, referring to somebody who doesn't have a bris, to include somebody who undid the bris, somebody who was a mashach. Versus why do you need two psukim? What's wrong with the first pasuk? Versus first, a pasuk might just include somebody who needs his mila redone because there were strips of skin that covered the edge and it wasn't properly cleaned up, and therefore you don't know from there that's from somebody who's mashach. In the second pasuk, which is openly including the mashach. So, like we said, the one who saw this saw that we're bringing psukim, so he said obviously the requirement for this meal is deraisa, which is therefore kasha of Huna, who said that it's only derabanan. But it's not a kasha. The answer is that it's just an asmach. It's just a support, just a hint from the psukim, but it's not an actual limud from the psukim. All right, now where's the second kasha on Rav Huna? And that's a brisa, which discusses a number of people and their status as far as eating truma and korbanos, kachim. So it first mentions tumtum. Tumtum is actually mentioned twice, once in the beginning of the brisa and once in the end. The Gemara will discuss why. So the tumtum is somebody who has a layer of flesh covering his male or female area, and we do not know which one he is. We don't know what's going on under there. So the tumtum cannot eat truma. Simple reason is because he may be a male, and he obviously doesn't have a bris milah if he is. His women, the Mishnah said, the Brisa says his women, and there'll be a machlokes what this means. His women and his avadim are allowed to eat truma. Now here's our key point: a mashoch, somebody who has his arla redrawn, and a nolad mahol, somebody who's born with a milah, never had the mitzvah of milah performed, they are allowed to eat truma. And the Kasha of Huna, because Rav Huna would have said that it's also for a mashoch to eat truma midrabanan. Now, in androgynous, if somebody has both male and female simanim, is allowed to eat truma. Of course, if he had a milah on his male organ. However, he cannot eat karbanos because women are not allowed to eat karbanos, and he is a suffix whether he's a woman or not. Now, the Brisa ends off by mentioning tumtum again, and it says that a tumtum cannot eat truma or karbanos. And the implication here is to include karbanos because he may be a woman. We don't know what's going on there. So the Gemara spells out the kasha we see here against Rav Huna, because we see that a mashach is allowed to eat truma. The Gemara says tiyufta, Rav Huna tiyufta. That is indeed a kasha rejects Rav Huna based on that. Now the Gemara wants to know, what does it mean the nashav of a tumtum? What is a tumtum's women? So the Gemara says two approaches. First of all, maybe he'll tell me that he's married. So the Gemara says, how could it be married? The halacha is that a tumtum, we don't know if he's male or if he's female. If he's mekadesh an isha, she's mekudeshes misafe because he might be male. If a man is mekadesh the tumtum, then they are mekudash. She or he is mekudash misafe because he might be a female. Therefore, we're machmir to assume that he's male or female either way. So why would we assume that he is a male or a female to allow his wives to eat truma? Why would we assume that he's a male and allow his wives to eat truma? That is, if he's married to a bas Yisrael and he's a Kohen, why would we say that his wife can eat truma? How would that make sense? Maybe he's a female and therefore his kedushin to a woman, bas Yisrael, doesn't count as anything, and she's not allowed to eat truma. She's still a regular bas Yisrael. So the Gemara again has two approaches here. So Abaye says we're referring to a case where we know he's male, that you can see through the form of the flesh covering his area what is under there, and therefore you know that he's male actually, and therefore if he's mekadesh and isha, it's chal kedushin. He can't eat truma because he's an aro, but she, his wife, is allowed to eat truma because she's now married to a Kohen, even though he's a tumtum. Rava says we're not talking about his wives. When it says his women, it means his mother, and that is if his mother was a bas Yisrael married to his father who was a Kohen, she's only, and his father died, she's only allowed to eat truma. His mother, that is only allowed to eat truma if she has a child, and he is the child. He gives his mother the right to eat truma. So the Gemara says that would be pshita. Of course, he is a child. Just because he's a tumtum doesn't mean he's not alive. Why would I think otherwise? The Gemara says you may think that only a child who can create further offspring is allowed to give the right to eat truma to his mother, because it has to be a continuing line of descent that keeps his mother in his father's household. This person is a tumtum, can never bear children, obviously, so you may think that he does not. The phrase used in the psukim is also yoylid, the one that gives birth, and therefore you may think that a tumtum does not give his mother the right to eat truma as being part of his father's house. The chiddush therefore is that he does give the right to eat truma. Now the Gemara is a kasha. We see two approaches. We see an Abaye who says that he's married because we know he's a male. Rava said that we don't know what he is, and he's still a suffix. So the Gemara says, what is the repetition of the phrase tumtum in the end of the brisa? Why does it repeat and say a tumtum is not allowed to eat truma but is allowed to eat karbanos? So according to Abaye, it's good because the first tumtum that's listed is talking about a tumtum which is a vadai male and he's vadai in oral, and therefore the repetition is to talk about a tumtum who's a suffix, to show that a suffix is also not allowed to eat a truma because he's a suffix male and would therefore be a suffix oral. According to Rava, that the first tumtum is also talking about a suffix. So what's the second tumtum for? So the Gemara says the second tumtum doesn't mean a tumtum, it means an oral. The word tumtum just really means covered over and hidden. So it's referring to the arla that's on the makam hamila of the person. He's a real oral. That's what it's referring to. So the Gemara says, well, what do you have to tell me that an oral can't eat truma? If you tell me that tumtum can't eat truma because it's suffix oral, then a vade oral for sure can't eat truma. But he says, no, we're not really telling you a new halacha. We're explaining why a tumtum can't eat truma. We're explaining that a tumtum can't eat truma because an oral can't eat truma, and you're to understand that a tumtum is a suffix oral. All right. Now the Gemara wants to say that this entire issue is a machlokes tanaim, this halacha of Rav Huna, whether or not a mashach, one who had his mila reversed, is he allowed to eat truma midiraisa or midirabanon? That's a suffix. That's a machlokes tanaim. Where do we see that? So the Gemara is going to go to a listing of various different special milas. The Gemara is going to show there's a machlokes whether those special milas could be done during the day or even at night. The halach is that a real mila, a regular, straightforward mila, bisman, on the right time, the 8th day, where nothing's being redone, has to be done during the day. You see that because it says, on the 8th day, during the day only, he gets a bris mila. Now, what about a redone mila? So what's the halacha there, or any other special case of milas? That's what this brisa is about. The brisa says it's a machlokes, and the Gemara wants to say the machlokes is based over whether it's a deraisa or a derabanan. Deraisas have to be done on the day, and derabanans can be done even at night. So let's see the brisa. So the brisa says the following people are machlokes if their mila can be done at night. So there's a mashoch. There's a machlokes whether or not we include a nolad mahol here. There's a ger that converted and already had a mila. A katan who is already past the 8th day requires a mila but shaloi bizmanai. And any other type of mila, that phrase is to include somebody who had 2 orlos, somebody who has 2 layers of orlo. One was removed, and now he has to have the second one removed. So Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon says the Tanakama says these require mila only during the day, just like a regular mila, and Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon says these can have mila even at night. Now, again, the Gemara therefore says machlokes must be whether it's a deraisa or a derabanan, and therefore it's a machlokes over Rav Huna's halacha. The Gemara rejects this. The Gemara says can't be what this machlokes is about, because one of the things on the list is a katan she'avar zmanai, a katan who missed the 8th day. You want to say that there's a possibility anybody holds that a katan that he never got a bris milah is only chayv in a milah derabanan. The raisa, if you missed the 8th day, you don't have to do a milah. Nobody holds that way. That can't be. So there has to be a different explanation as to what this machlokes is about. So what is this machlokes about? So the Gemara says some of these are deraisas, some of these are derabanans. The machlokes is about the drasha of bayom. It says bayom hashmini. The question is, what is the vav for? Or it says ubayom hashmini. What is that vav including? So one Tana here holds that you make a drasha from the ubayim and you include even a special case of mila has to be done only during the day. The phrase bayim hashmini applies to him also. The other Tana, that would be the Tanakama, says no, you don't have a drasha of ubayim, and therefore all these special cases, deraisas, derabbanans, can all be done even at night. Now, even though the drasha doesn't apply to derabbanan, when the rabbanan created their takanas, they formed it similar to the deraisas, and therefore if the deraisa of a special mila allowed at night, the rabbanan in their special milas, because all their cases were special milas, would have also allowed night milas as well. Now, the Gemara wants to show that this is the pshat, this is what this machlokes is about, and the Gemara shows it in a conversation between Rav Yochanan and his Talmud about a different subject altogether. The Gemara brings a conversation between Rav Yochanan and his Talmud of Elazar ben Pidas about when you burn noisar, that is, karbanos that are left over after the proper time. So, in the day that they become leftover, so let's say they were supposed to be eaten within 2 days, and the sun rises on the 3rd day, so now it's noisar. So if you're going to burn it that day, it has to be done by Yom. That everybody agrees to. What if it's left over and it doesn't get burned that day from thenceforth, can it be burned at night, or does it have to be burned only during the daytime, whatever day it is going to be burned? So there you have Rav Yechanan, who says that you can burn it even at night, and he learns it out from the fact that when it says that the Vahanoisar Bayom Ashlishi Bo'eshi Sarif, the Noisar mi Psar Hazach Bayom Ashlishi Bo'esh Yisar. If it's only if it's being burned on the third day, that it has to be burned during the day. It's only Bayom, it's only if it's Bayom Ashlishi. So the Gemara says Rav Elazar ben Padas was his Talmud. This is not Rav Elazar ben Shamua, the Tana. This is Rav Elazar ben Padas, the Talmud of Rabbi Yochanan, said that I have a kash from you from this Mila, from Bayom Hashmini. And that's what we see in the case of Bayom Hashmini. It says Bayom Hashmini, the Mila has to be done during the day only if it's the 8th day. And over there's a machlokes, do other Milas that are late. Mila can be on day 9, 10, 11, or 12, based on what sfekos you have. If it's a suffix, when the 8th day is, you would end up doing day 9. If it's a suffix, it was born Erev Shabbos, or on Shabbos, it would be done in day 10. If there's a yontif there, it could stretch even to day 11 or 12. Any Mila that's Shalei Bizmanai, so that's a machlokas whether you have the drasha of the vav or not. What says Rav Elazar ben Pidas, the machlokas is only about the vav, but here you have a vav and a hey together. It says v'han noiser. Everybody agrees that you have a drasha based on the vav and the hey to include even things which are shaloi bizmane. So that was the conversation between Rav Elazar and Rabbi Yechanan. What we see from there is that the machlokas over the mila is based on how you darshan the vav. So that supports our conclusion here. Now, the Gemara looks deeper into that machlokas between Rav Yochanan and his Talmud Rav Elazar. The Gemara says that Rav Yochanan did not respond to Rav Elazar's challenge. He was quiet. He had said that you can burn it even at night if it's shaloi bizmane. Rav Elazar proved that you have the drasha vav. Hey, everybody agrees to. It's got to be bizmane, even if it's it has to be bayom, even if it's shaloi bizmane, even if it's not on the third day. So the Gemara says that after Rav Elazar left, Rav Yechanan turned to Reish Lakish and he said, "Look at Ben Pidas. He's sitting and he's dashing psukim like Moshe Rabbeinu b'piyah gvura, like Moshe Rabbeinu from the mouth of Hashem himself." So Reish Lakish said, "Don't be that impressed. It's not his own drasha. This all comes from a brisa. Where's the brisa? It's a brisa in the Torah Kahanim." And Rav Yechanan went out and he learned it. It took him 3 days to learn it and 3 months to explain it. Okay, now the Gemara goes on to a new topic related to an oral, and this is Rabbi Elazar. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Elazar says that an orel who sprinkles paraduma water is kosher. The sprinkling counts, paraduma water counts, even though he's an orel. How does he see that? He learns out of Tvul Yaim. A Tvul Yaim is also allowed to sprinkle paraduma water, and it counts. Tvul Yaim is somebody who had a obligation to go to the mikvah and wait for sunset before it became tahar. He already went to the mikvah, but sunset didn't happen yet. That's called a Tvul Yaim. He has a middle light level of tumah. We know from Xeris Akasav, which we'll see later, he is allowed to sprinkle paraduma water. So Rabbi Elazar wants to say that he should have the same halacha as an oral, somebody doesn't have a bris milah. Why do we compare the two? Because both of them are not allowed to eat truma. And so they're very similar status. They're not allowed to eat truma. So just like Tvul Yom can't eat truma, but he can sprinkle paraduma water, an oral can't eat truma, but he can also sprinkle paraduma water. The Gemara asks, but what do you mean? An oral, Tvul Yom is lighter because he's allowed to eat meiser. The Gemara says, who's talking about eating? We're not talking about eating here. You can't ask me kasha from eating. We're talking about touching. They're allowed to touch truma, and they're not allowed to touch truma. They are allowed to touch meiser. They are allowed to touch paraduma water, and that's why I'm comparing the two halachos. Okay, says the Gemara, we have a brisa that seems to show this halacha as well. It says in oral, who sprinkles paraduma water, his sprinkling is kshera, and there was an incident that happened, and the Chachamim were machshir that actual sprinkling. So you see clear brisa supporting Rav Elazar's halacha. Now the Gemara has a kasha from a brisa. The brisa says that a tumtum that mixes the paraduma water with the ashes, his mixing is pasul because he's a suffix oral, and an oral is pasul to do the mixing. And androgynous, if he adds the ashes to the water, that's kosher. Now, Rabbi Huda argues. Rabbi Huda says that the mixing, it's called kiddush, the mixing of the ashes into the water by an androgynous is puzzle, because he holds a woman is puzzle, and androgynous might be a woman. And androgynous has three possibilities as to what is considered: male, female, or something else, a new species called androgynous. Now, but either way, what we see here is that everybody says that an Arel and a Safek Arel are not allowed to do Kiddush. It's Gasha on Rav Elazar, who said that they can do sprinkling. The Gemara assumes that the halach is the same for the two of them, for sprinkling and for Kiddush. So the Gemara says, not a kasha, this is the opinion of Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva argues than everyone else. Rabbi Kiva learns from a drasha where it says ish ish. We've seen he says ish ish before. As far as Truma goes, he says ish ish mizer aron hutzerua izav bakachim lo yochal adashar yitar, and therefore he includes Truma into Tuma. Just like Tuma can eat Truma, a Oro can eat Truma, he includes an Oro to have the same halacha as a Tameh. Therefore he holds that just like a Tameh can't do Kiddush Paraduma, an Oro also can't do Kiddush of a Paraduma. It says, Rava, I was sitting in front of Rabbi Yosef, and I asked the kasha. My kasha is that if Rabbi Kiva holds that an Oro and a Tameh are the same halachos, then it should put them together. You should find Mishnayos that quote Rabbi Akiva and should say Ha'arov v'Hatame. You should put them together because it's always the same halacha. Why don't we find them listed together? So the Gemara says we do. We have a Mishnah that says Ha'arov v'Hatame Peturim min Hariyah. An Aro and a Tame are both not obligated. They're both patur. They cannot do the mitzvah coming to the base of Bigdash to be Oler Regel and bring a carbon Riyah. Someone says, no, that's different. That's not because they have the same halacha, that's because there's a common aspect, the two of them, that there's a similar reason why we don't want them doing Riyah, and that's because there's something Mias. Tameh is Mias, and Oral is Mias. But other than that, we don't see anything here. Alright, now the Gemara goes to the Machlokes between the Rabbanan and Rabbi Yehuda about Kiddush of the paraduma water, mixing the ashes into the water. We've seen it as a machlokes about a woman. So the Gemara wants to know what is that machlokes about. Similar quote to Bryce that says, the Tanna Kama says everyone's kosher to do the Kiddush except for Cheresh, Shota, Katan. Cheresh, Shota, Katan, the only ones who cannot do Kiddush. Everyone else can, which means a woman can, Katan cannot. Rabbi Yehuda says the opposite. A Katan is allowed to, and Isha is not. Now, androgynous is there also out because an androgynous might be an Isha. Says Gemara, what's the reasoning? So the Rabbanan learned from the fact that it says v'lokhu atomim me'afar seifas achatas. After discussing the Kiddush, talks about Hazah. It says the v'lokhu atomim me'afar seifas achatas, and they should take whoever did the Kiddush can do the Hazah. And we have a drasha about the Kiddush, and therefore this applies to Hazah as well. And therefore what's kosher for one is kosher for the other. We have a drasha for one. We can learn to the other that a Isha is in and a Katan is out. So the Gemara says it's from Asifa. It's from the Asifa. The phrase before was referring to Asifa, the gathering of the ashes. There we have a drasha clearly that includes a woman and excludes a Katan. Rashi gives us what the drasha is. Now, says the Gemara, what does Rabbi Yehuda hold? Rabbi Yehuda says, why does it say Vilakhu, and they should take? If you're right that it's the same people who did before and no one else, same rules as whoever did the gathering can do the Kiddush, so then it should say Vilokach. Why does it say Vilakhu? That's to include somebody else. It's to include a Katan. Says the Gemara, then why is a woman excluded? A woman's excluded because it says Vinasan in the masculine form. If a woman was supposed to do it, it could say Vinasna, and she should do it. Now, what do the Rabbanan do with Vilakhu? Why is it Vilakhu? So they say if it only said Vilakach Vinasan, then you would think is one person doing the Lokach, one person doing the Nesina, one person doing the gathering, that is, one person doing the Kiddush. And it's got to be done by one person, maybe even two separate people, but it has to be done by one person. And therefore it says Vilakhu. And if it say Vilakhu Vinasnu, which would be the same phrase, then you would think that each one has to have two people. Therefore it says one time Vilakhu, and then it says Vinasan, that it can be done by one or by two. Now, how do you know that a Tful Yom is kosher for Hazah? All this time we've been assuming a Tful Yom is kosher for Hazah. The Gemara says, because it says, V'hiza ha-tahar al-hatame, that the sprinkling should be done by a tahar. Now, you cannot be telling me somebody who's completely tahar should do it, because if that was the halacha, I would know that on my own. Just like any carbon has to be handled by a tahar, this has to be handled by a tahar. That's what I would have thought had you said nothing. Saying ha-tahar is to teach me somebody you would not have considered to be tahar is considered tahar, and that's referring to a Tful Yom.